when we're dancing in kirtan, it is not just Prabhupada would say, a ballroom dance. Of course, in modern ages, Prabhupada was speaking more in those days. People would go to ballrooms. Of course, that place that Prabhupada was with all those hippies, was the Avalon Ballroom. It's not just a dance. When we're dancing in kirtan, every movement of our body is an expression of our enthusiasm to serve the Lord, to please the Lord. It's an act of devotion in whatever we do. And Krishna sees our heart. So when we bow down, the bowing down is a method which enables us to fix our mind during the time we're bowing down to offering honor, respect, and love before the Lord or His devotees. The act of bowing down is like a regulation or like a ritual that is meant to remind us that we're the servant, to remind us that we should honor and respect the Lord and the great souls and all living beings. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, he's saying that I bow down to every living being, to all devotees, the Mahatmas and the new devotee who's just coming today, who just likes the taste of prasad. I bow down to all. This is his heart. So when we bow down, the act of bowing down, whether it's full dandavats or on our knees, it's the act of doing that is like a package to help us to focus that I'm offering my honor and respect and my love. And if actually that's our meditation, we become purified. In bhakti, everything is a meditation. Nothing is just a superficial ritual. The acharyas have given us these customs, these acts of culture or etiquette for very deep spiritual purposes of meditation. And the Lord sees the heart. When Vibhisana bowed down, the Lord didn't just see his body prostrated. The Lord saw in his heart he was fully surrendering his life. And Ram had such trust in him immediately. He told Lakshman, get water from the sea, we will coronate him the king of Lanka. And Ram personally coronated him with the water of the sea. They didn't have any crowns in those. They were living in the forest. That came later. But for Ramchandra, that's all that was required. A handful of salt water made him the king of Lanka. Later on, there was a formal ceremony after Ravana departed from this world. But from Ram's perspective, it's the spirit, it's the intent. That's all important. Now, the coronation of a king is a very great thing. Anybody, even right here in Bombay, you could just walk 2 blocks and get some salt water. Any one of you could throw some salt water on someone's head. That's all Ram did, what anybody could do. But it was a reciprocation of such deep love between them that salt water represented the highest exchange of trust and love between a Lord and his devotee. Yes, Vibhisana, he was so faithful to Ram. He told Ram everything about the army, so many instances. When the army of Ram was in its most difficult states, every time practically, Ram would turn to Vibhisana, and Vibhisana would give him the perfect advice. He was so intelligent. It was interesting because he was giving perfect advice to Ravana too, but Ravana wouldn't listen. Ravana lost his best man. And his enemy Ram got his best man. That was Ravana's ego. Ravana in his heart of hearts knew that Vibhisana was his very best friend, his most loving brother and well-wisher. But his ego was such an inflated state that he was blinded. He was blinded by his ego, and he was further blinded by all the people around him who just told him what he wanted to hear, who just kept infatuating and perpetuating his ego. And Vibhisana told him that. All these people are simply telling you what you want to hear. They are your enemies. He told Indrajit, you are supposed to be his son. You are his greatest enemy. What you are saying to him, you immature fool, is going to destroy him, destroy you, make your mother a widow, and destroy your whole dynasty. Keep your mouth shut, you fool. Ravana didn't like that. Because Indrajit was telling Ravana what he wanted to hear, that he was unconquerable, that Ram was just an insignificant human being, and that he would be victorious. So whether one is Vidura or Vibhisana, real love is to actually speak the truth with compassion, even if it means we're rejected, insulted. And ultimately it was Vibhisana who told Ram exactly the only way Ravana could be killed. And Ram did it, exactly according to Vibhisana's guidance. He killed Ravana. And when Ravana was laying in the battlefield dead, after Mandodari and the queens were beating their chests and weeping and crying as widows, Vibhisana was uncontrollably crying because his brother was dead. Why? Devotees, great devotees, to really understand this culture of bhakti is so deep. If you go to Melkote in South India, there's a place where Prahalad was feeling so guilty because he felt, because of me, my father was killed. And he was really like doing tapasya because he felt so bad. He loved his father, and because of me, he was killed. And Narsinghadev appeared to him on the mountain of Yoga Narsingha and told him, it's not because of you. It was because he was a demon and he caused so much harm and so much misery to so many people, and you also. But it's because of all his atrocities he was killed. It's because of you he got liberated. Here was little Prahalad. After all that, the power of forgiveness of a Vaishnava, after all that persecution, hatred, harsh words, Hiranyakashipu considered little 5-year-old Prahalad his worst enemy. And he dedicated his life to killing Prahalad in every way. And still Prahalad, every time he went before his father, he would bow down from his heart. And then, after finally Narsinghadev, it was just enough. When Hiranyakashipu was charging at Prahalad with his own sword to cut his head off, and Prahlad's just standing there, he's not fighting back. The Supreme Lord came out of the pillar, and finally, enough is enough. It was the right timing to honor Brahma's benediction. And after that, when Prahalad is asked for a benediction, please give my father liberation. No vengeance, no no anger, no hatred. He was a well-wisher. And similarly, Vidura, after Dhritarashtra stood there and allowed Duryodhana to speak the most horrible, painful words toward Vidura. The Bhagavatam tells us that the words of Duryodhana were like sharp, flaming arrows into the heart of Vidura. His own nephew is speaking like this. And Dhritarashtra allowed him to do it. Dhritarashtra was fully responsible for Vidura being exiled in the most harsh and cruel way. That you get out from this kingdom and the only thing you're allowed to take with you is your breath. That is cruel to somebody who's been your well-wisher and friend for his whole life, faithfully serving you. But after the battle, what did Vidura do? He went back to Dhritarashtra. He went back to Dhritarashtra, the man who rejected him. The man who engaged in such criminal, horrible activities due to his son's influence. He went back to liberate him. He preached to him, he convinced him to go to the forest, and Vidura went to the forest with him. Vidura went through so much trouble just to help his brother. And because of Vidura, Dhritarashtra And Gandhari was very much like Mandodari. She didn't like any of this stuff either. She was giving Dhritarashtra good advice, but she couldn't listen. Why didn't, he was speaking to the dead corpse of Ravana, why didn't you listen to me? I told you. Mandodari told you. Mandodari's, or your own, my maternal grandfather told you. Everyone was telling you why you did this. He wasn't saying it with hatred. He was saying it with love. Prahlad did the right thing. Vibhishan did the right thing. Vidura did the right thing. And it was very much opposed to the brothers or the father, but it was with love. It was not with hatred. So even when a devotee is misused, the devotee will do the right thing. They may defend, but never with vengeance. Even in Bhagavad Gita, when the war was about to begin, Arjuna looked around and decided just to forgive everyone and go away. Krishna didn't, the whole Bhagavad Gita was not to teach Arjuna to be hateful and vengeful and fight the war. The Bhagavad Gita was to teach Arjuna to be forgiving and compassionate and kind and loving without ego and fight the war because it's the right thing to do. It's Dharma. And that's the way Prahlad and Vidura and Vibhishan was. And the proof is he cried when his brother was dead. And in today's verse, Ram himself is telling Vibhishan, perform the last rites. And Vibhishan is saying, no, I can't do it. I'm surrendered to you, but I can't do that. He was so evil. He caused such pain to so many people, including Sita, the goddess of my heart. What to speak of everyone else in the universe? I can't do this, the last rites. I love him. He's my brother. I wish only the best for him. But considering the quantity and the quality of his misbehavior, I cannot do it. And Ram told him, we had to battle against his anarthas, but the soul is good in everyone. Now all the anarthas are finished. All that's left is where his soul is going to go. You should love the soul in everyone. We were not fighting against him as a spirit soul. We were fighting against the adharma, the atrocities born of ego and envy that was in his heart. But now those things are slain. Now we should only give love and compassion for the soul. It's very similar to sadhana bhakti. We're fighting against so many of our internal anarthas. Lust, anger, envy, pride, greed, illusion. But when those enemies are slain, what's left? Just the pure soul, part of God. Freed, liberated. So Ram told Vibhishan, you should not hate anybody. We may hate and fight against. They're anarthas. They're adharmic, irreligious behavior. But it shouldn't be with hate for them, because he's a pure soul. He's my child. Perform the last rites and free his soul from going to hell for all of his atrocities. Because his soul was destined to be suffering the reactions of everything he's done. But you, Vibhishan, if you perform the last rites, you will liberate him on my behalf. So Ram is the source of this devotee's forgiveness. If here are two people that Ravana mistreated more than anybody. Ram. He was constantly blaspheming Ram. He stole the dearest thing of Ram's heart, his very life and soul, Sita. He stole. Mad bhakta pujavyadika. As we treat a devotee of the Lord, that's how we treat the Lord. If you mistreat the Lord, that is not as disturbing to the Lord as if we mistreat his devotee. Lord Chaitanya, when people mistreated him, he just forgave them and smiled. But when they mistreated his devotees, he would be angry as fire. And who's the dearest, most intimate and loving of all devotees? Sita. Ravana was torturing Sita with the desire to exploit her in the most vulgar, horrible ways. Ravana's mind was fixed 24 hours a day on having the grossest types of sex with Sita. He was cursed that if he ever violates a woman's chastity against her will, his head would crack and he would die. Otherwise, he would have done that. His intention, he would have raped her all day, every day. But he couldn't. So he was emotionally torturing her to get her to do that with him. And when she resisted, he had her surrounded by Rakshashis who were tormenting her practically 24 hours a day. The only friend she had was Vibhishan's wife and daughter, who would come secretly and pacify her. So besides Ravana killing and eating sages and rishis and feeding demigods, and all the other atrocities that Ravana did against Krishna's devotees, Ram's devotees, what he did to Sita, the most intimate devotee. And any time the name Ram came up by anybody, he would blaspheme. Just a human, just an insignificant piece of straw. I will destroy him. And yet, when the sins were cleared, Ram, with love toward Ravana, is telling Vibhishan, do the last rites. He should be liberated. He shouldn't suffer for any of his sins. Ram is the example. Hate the sin, but not the sinner. And Vibhisana performed the last rites on Ram's order with love to liberate the soul of Ravana. These stories are very powerful. As Yajnaparusha Prabhu was speaking in his nice class a couple days ago, for me it seems like years ago, because yesterday was at least 10 years. But he was explaining that when we read about Ravana and his atrocities, it's not just something that historically happened long ago. It was that, but it's presented in the scriptures because it's what we have to confront within our own selves and all around us. So this conception, as we were speaking yesterday, of looking for the essence, seeing the soul, seeing the part of God within everyone, and then acting according to Dharma, but with that vision. With compassion, with love. Prahalada totally defied his father with love. He hated everything his father represented, but he loved his father. And Prahalada, he could have ran away from home, but he stayed there. He obediently went to his father's schools. Right, and respected those teachers. And Vidura, he stayed there right in the palace. Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana were planning to burn Kunti Devi and the Pandavas alive in that house of lac. And he's hearing these plans. And he's telling them, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, but they're going against his will. Secretly, Dhritarashtra didn't know. Duryodhana didn't know. If they knew, they probably would have kicked him out long before. He was sending messages to the Pandavas. Leave that house. On this date, they're going to burn it. Build a tunnel underground. But still, he stayed. Why didn't he go live with the Pandavas? He would have been happier. Very inconceivable, these great Vaishnavas. He was purely representing Dharma in the most adharmic situation. But he never hated Duryodhana. He never hated Dhritarashtra. He was their well-wisher. Prahalada, Vidura, Vibhisana. Ramanujacharya, that one pujari at Sri Rangam, hated him. He was envious of him. He was thinking he was getting so much popularity, so much power, he decided he must be killed. He invited Ramanujacharya to his house for lunch, and they put poison in the food. And he was away when Ramanujacharya came, and his wife, who, when she looked at Ramanujacharya, she started to cry. She said, I can't give you this food because there's poison in it. Ramanujacharya was shocked. The head pujari invited me to his house for lunch, and his wife's telling me there's poison in the food. Pujari comes back. Did you give him the food? She said, I couldn't do it. stupid woman. So then he knew that Ramanujacharya would take Charanamrit. So he put deadly poison in the Charanamrit. And personally, in the temple, he gave Ramanujacharya poisoned Charanamrit. And Ramanujacharya knew exactly what was happening. He knew that this man just tried to poison him, but he took it anyway. And Ramanujacharya has explained, he was so full of compassion toward this person, even though he knew the guy was poisoning him. He was in ecstasy. And in the ecstasy of compassion and forgiveness for this man, he started trembling. And when the pujari saw him trembling, he became really happy. Because he was thinking the poison is having its effect. He will die. And then Ramanujacharya, really in ecstasy of that mood of forgiveness and compassion, he went out there to give a lecture. And the pujari went out to watch him die. And Ramanujacharya was glowing in love with spiritual light. And at that point, the pujari realized, I'm really a bad person. This man is a saint. And he went over to Ramanujacharya and bowed down to him and surrendered and confessed. I tried to poison you at my home, and I put deadly poison in the Charanamrit that you drank from my own hand. And Ramanujacharya just smiled and said, just do the right thing. And he became his disciple. Ramanuja, as soon as he saw he was liberated from his evil, he loved him and accepted him as his own family, his own disciple. Liberated this man. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in Navadvip, so many people were becoming his devotees. But there were a class of people that no matter what he did, they hated him. They were threatened by him. They considered that as long as this Nimai Pandit has power, we're going to lose everything. Because they were getting paid lots of donations for performing all these ritualistic pujas, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was telling everyone, you know, it's all right, but everything's accomplished if you just chant the holy names. So they were blaspheming him. They were threatening to beat him. They were making all rumors against Srivas and all the devotees. One of the reasons Lord Chaitanya took sannyas was to make those blasphemers devotees. The innocent people, he didn't have to take sannyas. They were already becoming devotees. But to reach those people, he took sannyas, and he said it. Because if I'm a sannyasi, right now they think I'm just one of them, a grihasta, and they're treating me so bad. But if I take sannyas, they'll have to bow down to me. And if they bow down to me, they'll be liberated. How forgiving, how loving, the well-wisher of people who hate him, who are trying to destroy him. And he did. He took sannyas, breaking the heart of his mother, breaking the heart of his wife, breaking the heart of all the devotees, to give benediction to his enemies. Samoham sarvabhuteshu. The Lord has no enemies. He's equal to everyone. And ultimately, he reciprocates according to how we approach him. He wanted them to somehow approach him in a way that he could give them love of God. And this was his method, and it worked. After he took sannyas, even the blasphemers of Navadvip were weeping and crying that Nimai took sannyas and he left Navadvip. And they were all repenting for their offensiveness. And when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came back to Koladvip, all those people came to him and took shelter. And he gave them all Krishna Prema. So this is Ramayana. This is Srimad Bhagavatam. This is Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is Vaishnavism. This is Mahabharata. Vibhisana, the pious brother of Ravana and devotee of Lord Ramchandra, received approval from Lord Ramchandra, the king of Koshala. Then he performed the prescribed funeral ceremonies for his family members to save them from the path to hell.